Hello learners, I hope you are doing fine. Today we are going to have class. We have been studying capital budgeting under conditions of certainty. Capital investment decisions under conditions of certainty. This is our topic, and today we'll be looking at the second lesson. In our first lesson, we introduced the topic, capital investment decisions under conditions of uncertainty. We say that this topic can also be referred to as capital budgeting. Capital budgeting. Capital budgeting. And we say that this is simply the investment in long-term assets. Long-term assets or projects. These are projects or assets which are expected to last in the business for a period of more than 1 year. We gave the characteristics of long-term assets or projects. And I need to remind you that when we talk about conditions of certainty, now this is where the investors are sure about factors like the cost of capital, the rate of return, and so on and so forth. Where investors are aware or know the cost of capital or the cost of investment, then that is a condition of certainty. Where the rate of return can be ascertained, that will also mean that that is also a condition of certainty. So we are studying capital investment decisions under conditions of certainty, because sometimes decisions may be expected to be made where there is uncertainty. That is, the cost of capital is not known, and factors like the rate of return cannot be ascertained with accuracy. So capital budgeting in our last lesson, as I said, we only introduced. We also discussed the importance of capital budgeting decisions. I also reminded you that capital budgeting decision is one of the core functions of a finance manager. It forms part of the scope of financial management, capital budgeting. So today we want to proceed and discuss projects, the different types of projects, the classification of projects. That is what we are going to consider today. We are going to study categories of capital projects. And there are numerous types of capital budgeting projects. Number one, new projects. New projects. And new projects can be looked at in terms of new projects or products. Remember, our subtopic is classification. Classification of capital projects. Capital projects. Classification of capital projects. And I'm saying that this classification, the first one, we are talking about new projects. And these new projects can be seen from the perspective of new products or services or new markets. New markets. So new projects can be seen from the perspective of new products or new markets. So a new capital investment project is important for the growth and expansion of a company. It is also important for the economy at large, as it means research and development. This type of project is one that is either for expansion into a new product line or into a new product market, oftenly called the target market. The target market. So a new product or a new target market could conceivably change the nature of the business, and it should be approved by top-level management in the organization. And a new project, which can either be a product or new target market, requires detailed financial analysis and the approval of possibly the firm's board of directors. And an example of a new product would be, for instance, new medical service that is conceived, researched, and developed by a company specializing in medical devices. And perhaps this medical device could tap into a target market that the company had not yet been able to reach. So we are talking about new products or new markets. If it is coming up with a product, and that product may open up new markets, and we've given an example of medical device. And I've also just mentioned that such projects may need the approval of top-level management and possibly a board of directors, because the financial resources required to moot these projects are enormous. The resources required are quite big. So it may need the approval of board of directors. All right? So that is a classification of a capital project. New project or projects which can either be a new products or new markets. Then number 2 is expansion of existing products or markets. Expansion of existing products or markets. The expansion of existing products or target market means an expansion of the business. If a company undertakes this kind of capital budgeting product, they may or they are effectively acknowledging a surge in growth of demand. A detailed financial analysis is required, but not as detailed as that required for the expansion of the company into new products or new target markets. So expansion of existing products or markets is also a category of capital projects. Expansion of existing products or markets. So number 2, expansion of existing products or markets. So this expansion may not be as detailed. The financial analysis of expansion of existing products and markets may not be as detailed as that one of new products or new markets. Okay? Just an expansion. And that would mean that the company is responding to demand. If you are expanding, then you are meeting certain demand in the market. So you cannot just expand unless there is a surge in the market. or demand of the products or services of a company. Number 3, replacement project necessary to continue operations as usual. Replacement project necessary to continue operations as usual. An example of a replacement project necessary to continue operations as usual would be in a manufacturing plant. For instance, replacing a worn-out piece of equipment with a new piece of the same equipment designed to do the same job. This is a simple capital budgeting project to evaluate. It would be possible to use one of the simpler capital budgeting methods to evaluate this project and abide by the decision of the capital budgeting method. And the cash flows from a replacement project necessary to continue operations as usual are fairly easy to estimate, at least compared to other types of projects. And this is for the simple reason that the business owner is replacing the same type of equipment and is therefore somewhat familiar with it. So if you have a product which you have been, or a machine which you have been using, you may want to replace it. You may want to replace it. And the reason why replacement may be necessary is because of the production capacity of such a machine or a plant. Because I know you are all aware that machines depreciate, they lose value, they lose capacity over time or use. So such machines may need to be replaced. So number 3 is replacement. Replacement of existing machines or assets, all right? And evaluation of existing machines. Evaluating such projects is simpler compared to new ones. The reason being that the owner is familiar with such a machine. Even estimating the expected cash flows from such machines is quite easy because the owner may have experience with that machine for some time. So it is very easy to know at the end of year 1 what is the expected cash flows in terms of savings, cost savings, and so on and so forth. So a replacement decision is classification of what we are discussing here. So replacement of existing machines. Then number 4, replacement project necessary to reduce business costs. During times of recession, many companies look for this type of capital project. We are talking about replacement projects necessary to reduce business costs, because sometimes businesses need to replace some projects with others in order to reduce costs. An example would be replacing a piece of obsolete equipment with a more modern piece of equipment that is easy to have serviced. This type of capital budgeting project would require a detailed financial analysis with cash flows estimated from each piece of equipment in order to determine which one generates the most cash flows and thus saving the company money. So that is another type. In this case, you are talking about replacement. Here you are talking of replacement projects. But the intention is to reduce costs. In the first one is replacement still, but you want to expand. Okay? You are replacing a machine or a project, And the purpose is not to reduce costs, okay, but to maintain or to have more production. But as for replacement projects, the intention is to reduce the costs. Because remember, when, for instance, you are operating an old machine, the cost of maintenance may be high. So a company may want to replace such a machine with a new one, because servicing new machines is quite cheaper than servicing old machine. And another example would be those who are in motor vehicle industry, or transport, okay? Transport. A transport company would want to replace the vehicles at a certain period in time before they get too old, because maintaining old vehicles can be very expensive. So such vehicles are disposed of so that costs can be reduced. You can reduce the maintenance costs. So projects can be classified into 4. There could be many ways, but these are some of the ways in which you can classify projects or capital projects. We have said new projects, number 1. Number 2, expansion of existing products or markets. Number 3, replacement. Replacement of existing projects. Then number 4, replacement projects with the intention to reduce business costs. So we proceed to another section in our study today, and we want to look at categories of projects. Categories of projects. And the first category is mutually exclusive projects. Mutually exclusive projects. What are mutually exclusive projects? These are alternative options which serve the same purpose and compete with each other. Mutually exclusive projects refer to a group of projects out of which only one project can be selected for investment. A decision to undertake one project from mutually exclusive projects excludes all other projects from consideration. So investment decision in case of mutually exclusive projects is dependent on the relative merit of the projects. For example, a company may have an option of purchasing either a Land Cruiser or Honda CR-V vehicle for the managing director. If a Land Cruiser is bought, then the Honda CR-V option will be abandoned. So mutually exclusive projects are competing projects. These are projects which serve the same purpose. They serve the same purpose, so that if one project is undertaken, then the other one has to be rejected. Mutually exclusive projects. Mutually exclusive projects. Mutually exclusive projects. So these are competing projects. We have given an example of a Land Cruiser. If the company is planning to buy a motor vehicle for the managing director, and there is the option of Land Cruiser or Honda CR-V. Now, if you settle for Land Cruiser, then the Honda CR-V will not be bought, because the Land Cruiser will serve the purpose. Okay, will serve the purpose. These are competing projects. These are projects, mutually exclusive projects. When one is undertaken, then the other project will, of course, be rejected. Another point, contingent projects. Contingent projects. These are dependent projects. The choice of one project necessitates that one or more other projects should also be undertaken. For example, If a company decides to build a factory in a remote or backward area, it may have to invest in staff houses, roads, hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. So the total expenditure for building a factory and investing in other facilities for the employees is treated as a single project. Is treated as a single project. Number 2, contingent projects. Contingent projects. These are projects that are dependent projects. They depend on each other. So if you build, for example, you have said a factory in a remote area, in a desert somewhere, a backward area, where there are no roads, there are no houses, then you may be forced to build houses for employees. You may be forced to build roads. You may be forced to build hospitals. So the cost of investing in a factory and investing in roads and hospitals will be treated as a single project or investment. So they are different investments, but they are dependent on each other, because you cannot have a factory without workers, without roads, without housing. So contingent projects are dependent projects. Then number 3 is independent projects. Independent projects serve different purposes and they do not compete with each other. If a company is considering 3 independent projects, all of them can be undertaken subject to availability of funds, and also subject to their viability. Subject to number 1, viability of funds and viability. So the firm can, for instance, expand existing businesses and at the same time introduce a new product line. So when you have independent projects, these projects are not competing. They are not competing projects. So if you have, for example, project A, okay, the existing business. If you have existing business, for instance, you manufacture milk, okay, then you want to introduce another product line. You want to start manufacturing sugar and coffee. You want to invest in production of, this is the current business, but you want to expand into other product lines. You have to introduce other products, new products, say production of sugar, production of coffee. So these are independent projects, and these independent projects can be undertaken subject to their viability and subject to availability of funds. Subject to their viability. Are they viable? Okay, are they profitable? Do they offer high returns? And do you have sufficient funds to undertake such projects? So if the projects are viable and there is availability of funds, then all these projects can be undertaken at the same time. They are independent projects, okay? They are not mutually exclusive. where one project is undertaken, the other one is rejected. So here you can undertake any project as long as the projects are independent. So these are categories or classification of projects: mutually exclusive, contingent projects, and independent projects. So again, we are talking about capital investment decisions, okay? Investing in long-term assets or projects. So with that, we will come to a close. We come to a close of today's lesson. Today we have looked at classification of projects and categories of projects. We've said projects are long-term, simply long-term investment in fixed assets. And we will continue in our next lesson to learn more about capital budgeting. And I remind you, here we are considering capital investment decisions under conditions of certainty. This is where the investor is sure about the risk, the return, the cost of projects, and so on and so forth. The factors relating to the capital budgeting are certain, they are known, you are sure. So that is what we are doing. In our next lesson we proceed. Let's meet in our next class.